Hi, everyone, and welcome to Best Podcast Ever, where three idiots you don't know talk about a hobby you've never heard of. Except that is a blatant lie again, I suppose.
Yeah, again. Ironically, Kevin is actually at a wedding this time, so... As opposed to last time when he totally wasn't.
Nobody was at a wedding, we weren't coming back from a wedding, we didn't record a terrible podcast going to a wedding.
And a slightly less terrible one coming back that you did hear.
Did you destroy that recording, or did you...
It exists, but I didn't post it. Maybe it'll be
I don't know. Again, if we ever get the urge to, actually edit something and put something together...
When we get to 10 subscribers, I will...
I was going to say 10 episodes, we'll get there. No one will know, but we'll get there.
I was going to say 10,000, but 10 subscribers, at that point...
I'm going to be amazed if we make it to 5.
Yeah. I don't think, technically, I'm not a subscriber, actually.
Yeah, but that still would give us 3.
Yeah, I guess I'll...
Right, so now that we've scared everyone away in the first 35 beats,
hey
because,
guys.
Again, our software that, is clearly the problem here.
Yeah, definitely.
Not talent or motivation or topic or forethought.
A poor workman blames his tools. A great workman really blames his tools hard.
An even better workman has his friend show up with his superior tools because
yes.
couldn't be bothered to look at his tools.
Yeah, I haven't glanced at them in the 7 weeks since we recorded the video Killed the Pego Car episode. That doesn't sound good.
I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah.
But anyway... Today we wanted to talk about a topic that, again, only we care about. Let's be honest, all of this is only because we care about it.
Yeah, this is probably the most self-indulgent thing on YouTube, and that's really saying something, so...
We decided we were going to talk about... Oh, the beep is back.
Yeah, look at
that. God, we are bad at this. Anyway, we're going to talk about today why cars get made, as far as slot cars are concerned, as opposed to real cars. We totally have opinions on that, too.
Yeah.
And why you're never going to see a streetcar in 1/32nd, and why the opposite is true for HO.
Yeah.
So anybody who's done any amount of time in either of the scales has pretty much realized off the bat you're never going to find the street version of any car in 1/32nd. And if you do find it,
very few exceptions.
It's because of a strange exception. It's like, it's the bullet car.
Right, like Carrera has done a number of movie cars.
They've done a number of movie cars, and they did a handful of, hot rods, and, they're technically street cars, but they were never made.
They're more fantasy street cars than realistic street cars.
Yeah.
Carrera didn't do... here's a 64 GTO, and here's a Chevy Nomad.
Well, they're like, here's a cop car. And it's like, are you ever going to make just a Charger?
A regular Charger?
And,
no.
Well, they made a red one, and I think it was in a set. It was a red Charger getting chased by a cop car.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, except for a few movie cars and a few fantasy street cars, or what have you, Carrera hasn't done it, and nobody really else has. I mean, Spirit, because that's the gold standard of 1/32nd slot cars. One of the 3 cars they've ever made was a Mark I Golf GTI. But that's an exception.
There was a story about one of those because somebody I know bought one because they were a big VW fan, and eventually they sold it back to my dad, who again kept it for a little bit only to sell it again. So it seems that car is never actually going to be run. It just goes from VW enthusiast to VW enthusiast.
I mean, I'll admit I've thought about buying it. That actually represents the first car I was ever in my life. My parents had a black GTI just like that, but I looked at it and I remembered the one other Spirit slot car and thought, I don't really need a slot car of this.
We're actually pretty, to borrow a term from another game, spiky about the cars we buy in 1/32nd. So to kind of turn it back to the topic, 1/32nd is definitely a hobby of racing. And it's always been a hobby of racing, even back to the original Skelectrix cars, where it was 2, I believe they were steam cars that they modified to run on the tracks. I want to say they were either steam cars or wind-up.
Okay.
But steam, I don't know. I'm probably super wrong, but we don't have enough fans to correct me.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, Kevin's back.
Yes. Hi.
Kevin Mark II is here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having just tamed an ice bucket.
You should see the mess I made upstairs.
The ice bucket challenge has been run, and the winner is Kevin Mark II.
Kevin Mark II, known for having more horsepower.
Yes, and that's true.
I'm just trying to think of things that would annoy Kevin. Like, what's a unit of measurement that assigning more to anyone else would upset him?
Pounds per square inch. He's big on measuring boost in pounds per square inch.
Anyway, but yeah, 132nd has always been a hobby of racing, and the very first 132nd stock cars, to my knowledge, were made by Skelectrics, and they were F1 cars, as opposed to HO, where, again, born in England, but they were HO because they were a train set accessory.
Right, they were meant as an accessory to a train set, so you could drive cars around while you were driving trains around and just have your town populated more.
And the fact that it became a racing toy was kind of auxiliary to the plan.
Yeah, it was somewhat biased. Although, were those original HO ones actually HO? Because HO slot cars...
No. They were smaller than Thunderjets.
Right, which they themselves are smaller than any other HO slot car.
But, I mean, I'm willing to say the people they put inside them were HO.
So because real HO is what, 187th, right? Because O is 143rd. Yeah.
But if you look at the cars they chose, they were all tiny sports cars.
Right.
And then they put the 2-scale human inside this car, and it's roughly the size of a boat.
Actually, yeah, now that you mention it, the best example of that in the T-Jet library is the Indy car.
Yeah.
Because if you look at an early 60s Indy car, a roadster, a lay-down roadster.
It's a bathtub full of gasoline.
It's a bathtub full of gasoline with a guy in it. And it is not the size of a house relative to the guy. But if you look at the Aurora version...
According to Aurora, the tires on an Indy car are a man and a half.
Yeah, the guy, or conversely, the guy is like 15 inches tall, yeah.
Well, yeah, because I guess technically the, what were they called? Slimline T-Jets.
Those are reasonably to scale.
Those are nowhere near HO. Have you seen the size of that dude's head?
They're more to scale than the...
They're more to scale.
Oh, yeah, the guy is not HO scale at all.
They made him to scale with the car.
The car
But it's a bastard scale, which is a common thing, apparently.
Well, because the regular T-Jet scale is about 1/72nd.
Yeah.
And the regular HO scale for later HO cars is 1/64th, which is the Matchbox Hot Wheels scale, roughly.
Give or take.
So, although Matchbox used to put the scale on the cars, and it would be different on every car.
Yeah.
So.
But, I mean, if you look at the history behind it, HO never really got away from its we are a train accessory route, even when it became, I'm willing to bet it was slightly more popular than trains during its minor booms in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Before it got stomped to death.
I would say as a mass market toy, it was probably bigger than trains. I mean, trains, especially HO trains, became a niche hobby item, by the 80s.
Long before, yeah.
And I mean, there were definitely hardcore HO train hobbyists. My father was one.
Yeah, there still are hardcore
They are
HO
still
trains.
out there, but it became a niche hobby rather than a mass market toy.
Yeah,
pretty
and
quickly.
Aurora, which was one of the biggest companies, kind of set the pace for how HO was going to design their bodies and how they were going to really market themselves. And Aurora was king of, we're going to make one mold, and we're just going to change the color 1,000,000 times.
And we're going to recycle all the Western Electric telephones we can get our hands on.
Yeah, I mean, it was the only plastic they could really get their hands on, like you said.
I mean, it's tough plastic. You can't break... Well, you can break T-Jets, but you can't break a Western Electric phone.
You break the metal parts, you break the electrics, and that's how...
Yeah, exactly.
You destroy a T-Jet, but the plastic parts... I've seen the plastic gears wear down the brass ones.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know if that speaks highly of the plastic or lowly of the brass.
A little of A, a little of B.
Yeah.
It's just part of the mystique of T-Jet racing and why I've given it up.
And then with 132nd, you always see racing cars, because it's always been a racing thing. I don't think there are 132nd scale trains.
I don't believe so. G-gauge is... I don't know what scale it is. It's bigger than 132nd.
I feel like, though, whenever you see a train set that's one of the bigger scales, like an O scale, or all the trains are stationary.
Yeah.
Or not the trains, all the cars are
All the
stationary.
cars, yeah.
You know, like they might have the lights going, but nobody's moving.
Yeah.
Sign language?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's... So...
Okay. We're all doing the hand jive now.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's...
That's it.
Sorry. So, yeah, I don't think there is a train scale that corresponds to 1/32 per se. So, and actually, yeah, no, G is less than 1/32 because that would be enormous.
Yeah, and the only single lane 1/32 thing I've ever seen was actually a 2-lane track that Ninko just made turns for. Because HO has always had single lane track.
That's true, yeah.
And up until digital was a thing 1/32, you never had single lane track. Even Ninko, who made a rally set.
Right, it was side by side rally.
And then they had the one turn where you turn
Right.
around on yourself.
Right. So, yeah, that's true. I mean, it has always been racing oriented, and I guess, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's, you know, the European market share of 1/32 as well. Is that, you know, nobody says, "Hey, let's race street cars," because that doesn't
It doesn't
really
make
have
sense.
the
No,
same
no
appeal.
kid. I mean, I guess until the Fast and Furious happened, but
Yeah.
those cars even did come out in HO.
Yes, it did.
The Tokyo Drift series from Playing Mantis, where they aurora it again. They took cars from a movie and they kept changing the colors.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the one HO manufacturer that was really big on doing race cars was Tyco, and to a lesser extent, Tomy.
Yeah, but again, Tyco and Tomy were both guilty of doing the same thing.
Oh,
Tyco
yeah, no,
to
they
the higher extent. Again, the Lumina joke we always
Right,
make.
yeah, they
and the
absolutely-
Chapalola.
Right. I mean, they absolutely even treated different, you know, racing liveries as just another color of the same car. Even if the real cars were different cars, they didn't care. They just said, "This is the general shape of the car that had these colors on it, so we're going to make this car in that
It's
color."
an indie. It's an indie. It's an indie.
Tyco showed some restraint. They didn't, you know, the only Group C cars they made were Porsches. They didn't say, you know, here's a Porsche, this is Jaguar on it. So,
Because they couldn't get away with that.
yeah. You know, Tomy made a variety of them. Tyco just said, we're going to make Porsches and nothing else.
Tyco was always the underdog, which was the weirdest thing because, like, Aurora had the harder life. Until, again, quoting a review that will never come out, you know, they outlived their rivals. They outlived Aurora. They outlived Atlas. And, you know, until the grim reaper of corporate acquisition finally came for them.
Yeah, in the form of Mattel.
Mattel, who bought, again, they bought them for their RC line, and they immediately canceled everything. It was
Yeah, just immediately decided they wanted to focus on Barbie and Hot Wheels, pretty much. So,
I think Mattel's actually gone now.
I believe you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Hasbro might have bought Mattel.
Hasbro is getting real close to monopoly.
Because which is another Hasbro product, because they bought Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers.
There you go.
And kept both brands going at the same time. But yeah, the mass market toy industry is Hasbro at this point. So,
And speaking as somebody who used to work in the toy industry, and even used to work with Hasbro, because it's impossible not to.
yeah, it's the elephant in the room.
Oh, is that me? I used to work at a toy company.
Exactly, it was totally you.
It was, you know what? It was so many years ago, I forgot. Hasbro, is that like, you know, would Yahtzee be a Hasbro game?
Yes, it would.
It is
because
now,
it's
It
a
yeah.
sounds
Milton
like that
Bradley.
they have a Yahtzee on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin.
I wish I had something soft to throw at Brian. But I don't.
Oh, good, you went for the glass after saying was things to throw.
But I won't.
I'm in your house.
I know.
I'm not the
We're
one
at
who's
Kevin's house tonight.
you know, I'm not the one who's gonna have to clean up the Kevin fastball.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, a cat toy for those listening at home.
Yeah.
But even where we're at now, whenever you see HO announce new cars, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna remake the Boss 302 again. We're gonna make the '69 Yenko Chevy again."
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, HO will always, I guess, have the baby boomer timescale where history ended in 1970.
When I was selling slot cars, everybody who came in for a set for themselves always bought HO. And everybody who wanted a set for their children
One of 132nd.
always got 132nd.
Yeah, now it's interesting, and this is where, you know, without getting into the vagaries of demography, I always feel like millennials is a term that applies to too many years of people.
Millennials are young people you don't like. It's just become a term for that.
Pretty much. But, you know, for those of us, and I speak especially for myself, being a few years older, who are old enough to remember getting tired of the word millennium in the 90s.
Thank you, Y2K.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there was, at some point, a sense of despair that the cars that we grew up with would never be respected or viewed through the lens of being potential, even classics. And on the HO side, that has continued to be borne out. I mean, there's, except for, you know, a few movie cars, I mean, there have been Johnny Lightning, Ghostbusters, and Back to the Future cars. You know, which speak to kids that grew up in the 80s and 90s. You know, HO really doesn't have a whole lot to offer us.
And they're not even trying to offer anything. Like, Mega G got the closest recently. But even they are already outdated. They did Champ cars.
Right, they did the 2000s Panos Champ car.
Which is when...
which was it was current. It was current. It came out in 2007. Those cars raced for one season in 2007. So that was, they actually were current when they came out. So
and then they never followed it up, and then they made that Peugeot and Audi, and I don't think either of those cars have raced in the past.
No, not in a while. Because the Audi R10, which is the car they made, was succeeded by the R15 in 2010? In 2009 even?
Is Peugeot even racing anymore?
Peugeot doesn't race anymore. Actually, Audi doesn't either. Le Mans is this weekend, and there's no Audi for the first time since 1999.
So
1998.
who put in prototypes?
In P1, there is just Porsche and Toyota. That's it.
Did they not allow diesel anymore? Is that what happened?
It's not that. I mean, Audi was running with a diesel hybrid.
Yeah.
P1 is now a hybrid class, much like Formula One.
Well, because it's supposed to be the fastest, and it's just whatever you can do to make it the fastest.
Right, so the idea
until
is...
Ferrari starts to lose, and then they change the rules.
Right, yeah, I mean, so the idea is, the maximum technology at this point is to have both, an engine and an electric motor. So, the fastest classes are going to be hybrid classes for the time being, because that is the most power, literally the most ways you can put power to the ground.
And we are going to see in the next year the car that won Le Mans as a 132nd car. We're going to see every major manufacturer make one. We're going to see Scalextrics make one. We're going to see Carrera make one.
They'll all take
We're going to see NSR make one.
Yeah.
But we're not going to see HO one get anywhere near it, because there's no company right now.
In HO Le Mans is a race for 4 GTs. Basically. I mean, again, Tyco and Aurora both did Ferrari 512s and Porsche 917s in the 70s. And they both did 956s and 962s in the 80s. And Aurora, in the form of Tomei, went on to do Jaguars and a few others. But
I mean, was that the last time Americans watched Le Mans?
In the 80s? Or rather in the
60s when...
I would say probably in the 70s, the period that the Steve McQueen movie is set in, which was filmed during the 1970 race, so the Gulf 917s are there. The Ferrari 512s. There's a lot of Lola T70s in the race, which were Chevy powered.
What was that movie that came out recently? The one with the F1 one, the only good F1 one done by...
Oh, Rush.
Rush, yeah.
That was not recently.
That was about 5 years ago.
It's the most recent F1 movie.
It was certainly the most recent good racing movie.
It was a great movie.
And, clearly they could only have on the track F1 cars that, survived. And they loved showing off the six-wheel march.
Yeah.
Because it's still around.
Well, to be fair, I think that Ron Howard loves racing, but he only knows that much about it. So that's what he showed, is,
You might be right. I mean, Ron Howard, again... displaying the baby boomer version of cars, which is that the 70s was the last time cars were worth talking about. So,
and the weirdest thing about that is I didn't see any revival of, because those cars were already made by Scalextrics. I guess they couldn't make the Ferraris, but they could have made.
Well, Scalextric had made the Ferrari 312 that we saw in that.
Yeah, but as we've discussed, and for people who
they can't make it anymore.
They can't make it anymore. Let's go over that again, because this is probably the only episode where we've done anything coherent.
This is actually the most we've actually gone into any depth about anything, because we're not playing with cars.
It's because I'm here.
We're not playing video games, and we're not driving in a car, and only one of us is really drunk, so... Well, two, because...
Thank you.
Now that we're nice and off topic.
Anyway.
But yeah, so what happened is Ferrari doesn't want to have to deal with their own licensing. They only want to deal with cars and race cars.
Right.
So they sold the right to the dancing horse to Mattel, lock, stock, and barrel. Ferrari can only put it on cars.
Right.
So if you want a hat, you want a car.
That is amazing, and it's true, because I remember when I went to Italy in 2004, January 2004, I bought my father a Ferrari hat in Florence from a gift shop. And even a Ferrari hat that I purchased in Italy...
Had a Mattel logo on it.
And it was a fleece hat. Like, this was not something they would sell in the U.S. because it was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous object that only a European audience would buy. Even that had a Hot Wheels logo on it, yeah.
Italy name drop.
Vacation drop.
It's there.
So, yeah, there used to be all sorts of wonderful Ferraris to play with in slot cars, but now there's only Carreras and things that they get around with.
No, Carreras. That's my jingle for Carrera.
Well, so Fly, which goes under many names these days.
Yes, Sideways and such.
Madness, Fly Slot.
Spirit.
Spirit was technically something else.
That was spun off from Fly.
Yeah, it was one of the three founders who, shocker, they hate each other.
Mr. F, Mr. L, and Mr. Y.
Either way, like, they'll make Ferraris without the dancing horse on it,
yeah.
Which I'm positive's got to be still illegal.
I'm sure that is still violating the licensing agreement, but it's such a niche product, especially in Mattel's home market, that I imagine they don't care.
Or Cartrix doesn't make the Ferrari F1 cars, they make the Lancias.
Right.
And they still put the dancing horse on it because what are you going to do? Sue us over 250 cars?
Right. But yeah, I mean, I was hoping to see more of a revival of 70s F1 cars in the 132nd market after the movie was out.
It would have had to have been Carrera.
Scalextric already made the McLaren M23, which was the real star of the movie, because James Hunt is the hero of the movie.
Is he the hero or just the bumbling idiot?
Well, he wins. Spoiler.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't been to Wikipedia.
Yeah, and didn't know who won the World Championship in 1976. I mean, certainly it portrays Niki Lauda, I would say, in maybe not the most positive light.
Niki Lauda doesn't portray himself in the most positive light.
No, he doesn't. That's true. No. He's a very dour man, even now.
Well, even back in the day when he was still racing, and we bring this up a lot, there was a British comedian who they hired to do year reviews of the F1 races.
In the early 80s, yeah.
And I believe he referred to Niki Lauda as fresh out of the kiln.
Yeah, that's rough.
Recently baked.
Yeah.
Was making fun of his airline the entire time.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, Scalextric made so many M23s that they made the bastard M23 that was campaigned for 2 races by Gilles Villeneuve, who is known as a Ferrari driver, but he did actually make his F1 debut with McLaren.
And then, for some reason, we'll never understand, every last one of us bought one.
Because that was the non-set car.
They existed in... Well, no, but we all knew as a slot car, that was a terrible car.
Yeah, that's true.
It was good until it crashed. Yeah. And then it was like a real F1 car. Like, it had a crash test rating of don't.
Yeah. Yeah, we just wanted the M23 to work. But, you know, I would love it if there were more F1 cars from that era. But as we always say, F1 cars are a difficult thing to engineer in slot car form. So.
And then Fly made some decent ones, and then they made some really bad ones.
The FW9 was not good. The Mark 761 was great. It was actually a
My
really good
Lotus
car.
was actually pretty good too, but once it broke, there's no saving it.
72?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kept up with the Marshes. In fact, I used to
forgot
run it
Ford made
anyway.
one, yeah.
But it had one of those
Who's
like
making
triple
one?
crown
There's someone
gears.
else is making a Lotus 72 now.
The red one?
Yeah.
Skelectrix made one, and I'm sure that's the one you're not thinking of because that
someone-
I have that one and it's terrible. It's a one-off company.
Yeah.
They even made the Renault that I want, the Turbo Renault.
That's right, yes.
But they're so terrible that even a local racer at NJ Hobby has taken to having to buy the 3D printed chassis
Right.
and essentially rebuild the entire car.
Polycar, there you go.
Yeah, but it is polycar. And
I had to picture it being said in the voice of the person we're talking about.
and when you have to take an entire car, and at least with flies, the joke
Like the Fly Lola right there.
yeah. Yeah, well, the joke with the flies is you always had to take them apart and put them back together before they worked.
Yeah.
With Polycar, you have to completely gut them and put just slotted parts in it.
Well, the Fly Lola in question has a 3D printed chassis in it with slotted running gear, and I had to grind off the ass of the driver figure to make it fit. So, sorry, Mark Donahue.
Well, and that's what I don't understand about modern Skelectrix cars. To go slightly aside from our race car versus street car debate here, Skelectrix has recently changed from a Sidewinder setup to a inline setup.
Yeah, almost everything they make now is in line.
I can't imagine that's cheaper to do, but they're doing it for reasons I don't understand. So now the cars handle worse.
Mm-hmm.
They have less pickup.
Yep.
They have gears that are harder to change.
Yep.
And you can't have a full interior anymore.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly it's like Number Muncher. Their legs go straight into their armpits.
I think the interior might be the reason. It might just be that gave them an excuse not to build full interiors.
But they could have just did what they were doing in the past. We all knew they only ever made one interior and put it in every car.
Yeah, and one driver figure.
Yeah, that wasn't a secret. I can't imagine. Skelectrix has been making so many decisions that just make my head spin.
Yeah.
Okay, and now we're going to take our logo and make it grayscale. Okay, and now we're going to take our cars and make them inline. Okay, and now we're going to take our high impact series and put renders of the cars on the box and put no window in. And here's what I'm thinking there is their sets never used to have a window where you could see the car. They do now.
They do now, but the individual cars are now packed in a box that have just a render of the car.
And what?
I guess they're hoping you will buy the set on how good the car looks, which...
As somebody who used to sell these sets, I always hated Carrera for having the cars in that little window.
Yeah.
They get kicked.
Yep.
They get essentially just puts them in harm's way. They get sun faded. They just get beat up.
Because the sets sit on the shelf a lot longer than the loose cars do.
Exactly, because essentially it's either I used to say 2 weeks before Christmas, but now thanks to Amazon now it's 2 hours before Christmas, so you're not selling sets.
Right.
Because back when Amazon still had like lead time, it was 2 weeks, and then people couldn't order anymore, and then it became 2 days. And people couldn't order anymore.
And now it's like 2 hours.
Literally, the belt I'm wearing now, I ordered on Amazon now in Manhattan at my job because I forgot my belt.
Hey, there you go.
It was $10 and they delivered it to my desk.
No, it's nice that they delivered it and didn't just leave it somewhere. Because the few times that I've done same day delivery where I work...
they have it in JC?
First, it's not Amazon now, it's just the regular same day.
Oh, okay. No,
Which means the van that has an Amazon magnet on it
rolls
up,
Amazon that day
throws your thing out the window and
got
drives
junks
off.
for you on a different day.
Yeah. So, I have found Finding Nemo.
You found him.
Look at the bottom.
Ah!
Let a cat get it?
No, this is a whole other issue. It looks like it's been used as a roller skate. So. But yeah, I mean, to wind us way back on the topic, I mean, and I guess maybe that's a big part of why, to me, the appeal of 132nd is greater. You know, if you're not into muscle cars, then there's always just like this weird thing about HO where it's like, you're either buying the blister-shaped cars, the blister-shaped racing bodies that resemble
Which
modern
have
cars.
to make light of a pun here, but those cars have such a body count at this point. Everybody I know who makes those bodies has ended up dead.
That's true.
That resin is not good for you, it would seem.
Apparently not. That is true.
So you either have that, and those bodies are very regional specific. You're going to find them around the fray,
Right.
and you're going to find them in the Northeast.
Yep, and that's
the end.
Because that's where the people that race them are found.
One of the guys, and I'll break my rule about not saying names, but I'll say it because he does sell these.
Mm-hmm.
Victory Tires by one of the racers in NJ Hobby, Victor.
Mm-hmm.
He makes the tires for his race group.
Yep.
And he ends up shipping them all over the United States because between the Northeast and California, you're just not going to get these customized racing parts as opposed to 132nd, where you can get slotted parts everywhere. You can get NSR parts everywhere.
Right. Anywhere there is slot car racing, there's NSR parts and there's slotted parts.
More so slotted, but yeah.
Slotted especially.
Well, NSR, and here's the thing, I don't even know why. I think it's just to annoy the owners. Like, I always root for NSR, I'm always driving an NSR, and I'm always losing to slotted.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're going to take both cars out of the box and run them head to head. I mean, an NSR out of the box will beat your average slotted out of the box.
You're right, but when we actually take the magnets out and,
Right.
and
But if you're
gear
going to race prep them, then slotted, just by virtue of the parts library, is going to make it easier for you to win.
Maybe it's because I enjoy the fact that they're actually handmade outside of the bodies. We all know they've been using Skeletrix molds.
Right.
Not a secret. But the parts are still handmade.
Yeah.
They're not using Mabuchi motors. They're actually making their own motors. They glue and true their tires, and it's a good. I've had one set of glue and true tires now for like 5 years.
They do work.
As opposed to Slot It, where I feel like the quality on those is starting to head a little south.
On the cars as well, yeah.
And the engineering.
Yeah.
Who came up with that front end?
Oh.
Is what I want to. So
The LMP front end?
The LMP front end.
Oh.
So again, for those of you listening at home, you probably, if you've made it this far into this actual Slot Car podcast,
we're staying on topic here, which is rare.
You'll know that NSR and Slot It used to have very similar guide flag setups where you'd have the eyelets.
Which is your just general 132nd.
Generic. In fact, the Slot It even sells one called Generic, and it just has
Universal
a script.
Guide. And
yeah.
It really, because the same setup that Fly uses. And
Ninko
uses, and it's a better setup than Scalextric uses or Carrera uses.
So, and then they decided to change it for their LMP cars. One would think because the front end on those cars don't have a lot of room.
There's not a lot of clearance, yeah.
So it's this weird sort of, we're going to take a grub screw and put it through a
guide.
tinned part of a braid.
Yeah, it's bad.
Because we punched a hole in it. And that's
news.
the best idea they could come up with. And then they decided, oh my god, look how amazing these grub screws are. And put them in everything.
Yeah. I mean, of course, they had them in their wheels previously. But,
I don't consider, and everybody hates popping an eyelet. Mm-hmm. Everyone hates doing that. Because you have to take the whole car apart.
But you're right, they've gone to the grub screws. When you buy
which destroys the wire now
when
if it ever
pulls. When you buy any
pulls.
slotted out of the box, even if it has the conventional slotted
guide, it has grub screws in it.
They have now grub screwed the wires into the braids rather than just using eyelets. It makes no sense.
I mean, I guess in theory it lasts longer. And I guess in theory it's less finicky. And I mean, call us old fogies, but at the same time, it damaged everything less.
And also, change your damn braids. You're racing. If you're going to race competitively, change your damn braids.
I do end up changing them quite often because the braids harden.
Yeah, they do. Well, that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, it costs nothing to change them.
You buy one spool of NSR braid, which...
You're good for a long time.
Yeah, by the way, that's the one thing that NSR still has the best right now.
Yes.
Is their ridiculously soft racing braid.
Yeah.
So long as you don't buy the pre-cut ones, which somehow they made hard.
Well, same thing with slotted. If you buy the braids pre-cut, they are much stiffer than the spool.
I think they're using a hot knife. I think that's the problem.
I think that's it, yeah. I think it hardens the edges when they cut.
Yeah.
Because you get a cleaner cut. I think that's the But really, I mean, you can cut them with scissors that you found in the garbage and get a decent cut.
Yeah, I was about to say, or as your dad would put it, those fucking scissors.
Yes. Or the scissors that are chained to the counter at NJ Hobby. Even I have cut braids with those, and it works fine.
Those scissors are missing their points too. They're just these
One
two
point.
flat.
No, 1 point has been snapped off as long as I have been shopping there, which is 18 solid years plus a few years, maybe 5 years prior to that I had been in there once or twice.
By the way, those are the only tools at NJ Hobby that haven't gone just totally missing. So the chain works. We're being handed an artifact.
It's a person playing his hole at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, it looks like.
Wow.
Is it? No, it's a Maryland flag. Maybe this is one of the Baltimore tunnels. Interesting.
Don't mess with you.
It's a nice picture.
Thank you.
Yes. What were we talking about?
That harkens back to a different joke we've made.
Which is?
Maybe next time we can go to the museum so you can see that too.
We could go to the art museum. Yeah, maybe next time we go to the art museum or the zoo. Well, here we have a photography exhibit. A few episodes ago, Kevin, I ended the episode by saying, next time, maybe we can go to the art museum or the zoo so you can enjoy not seeing that, because...
We did video games, which is purely...
Yeah, we did a whole episode on video
Yeah.
games, which is a visual medium, and this is not one. So...
Well, I mean, we can make it a visual medium. Like, we'd probably do much better if we put up pictures and stuff.
We could probably do at least the RCR stories, like, just putting up a picture
Yeah.
of what we're talking about.
Oops.
You live?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I think we could do that. Yeah.
We won't.
We won't, but we could.
Yeah.
We could. We admit that we could do it. But we choose not to, because we don't want to insult your intelligence.
Anyway, kind of dialing it back. Well, and then you look at the opposite side of the spectrum in HO, where there's no parts, whether they be from the manufacturer or from cottage industry. There's no support. There's no new cars being made. There's no new molds being made.
Right.
And I guess they just expect you to buy it because people don't stick around enough to want more? Or they're just buying from the backlog, or...
Yeah, pretty much. People there are just constantly buying and selling the same HO cars to each other. I mean, it's it's a whole economy of just buying and selling cars from each other.
Just laminate the $20 bill as it goes from the same three guys over and over again.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, here's an ice cream truck. Here's a snowmobile. Yeah.
Here's a blue candy Mustang that everyone has owned at one point.
Yeah, I have not. But
Well, neither of us have a collection.
No, neither of us has ever been a ECHO collector as opposed to an occasional ECHO racer.
The only thing that I even have a remote collection of, and I call it a remote collection because near the end, before I stopped doing it, and I still have games that I never played when I was doing video game collection. Because it used to be when I was first doing it, I bought because I wanted to play with it, much like with slot cars. You only buy the ones you go to race.
Right.
And then, like, near the end, I kind of went crazy, and I got a whole bunch of rare stuff because rare. Rare.
Everything is rare.
There's so much rare stuff out there if you, like, really get nutso into it. Like, I have a incredibly small collection of Jägermeister liveried 132nd cars.
Yes, that's true.
And my crowning piece, and it's one I haven't opened because it's worth way too much money, is a blue limited edition Jägermeister from Slot.it.
Oh, is it one of their event cars?
It's so Slot.it does this weird thing where they have limited edition cars that you as a store can't buy.
Right.
You can get like one or two of them, but you have to pay full retail.
Yeah.
And at that point,
yeah.
And full retail on these cars were $100.
They're done as commemoratives for their events. Isn't that how that works?
Well, I didn't have to go to an event, but I bought it directly from Slot.it.
Right. But I think that's the initial purpose of them.
I mean, I'm kind of amazed that they can get permission, assuming they got permission,
They probably do.
to take something like the 935
Yeah.
and something like the Jägermeister livery, which wasn't the most known livery, but it's a sought after livery.
It's well known. It appeared on a lot of cars over the years. It appeared on.
Yeah, but who drove the 935 with the Jägermeister livery on it? See,
off the top of my head, yeah. I don't
and if anybody knows it off the top of their head, it's going to be you.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Okay, now imagine those people when they see their car in photo negative.
Right.
Which is literally what they did.
Yeah, right. From orange to blue, yeah.
You know, we've made it different. Now buy it.
Well, I'm just thinking about it, like, it in terms even of slot cars, it's appeared on 935s and BMW 320s and the Alpha 165.
What makes, and this is probably a completely different podcast, but I wonder what makes people decide to advertise on a car. Because I've never said, like, oh, let me buy that because race car.
Yeah.
Other than let me buy that race car toy because race car toy.
Because I like the livery that's on it, yeah, but that doesn't help in the other direction. Yeah, I've even as somebody who has grown up and, I'm 32 years old and I have never, a year has never passed in my life where I haven't watched at least some professional racing. I have never once bought a product, like, been in the store and been like, well, I could buy this one that works, or I could buy this one because I saw it on a race car.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be why I'm buying it, is because I've seen it on a race car.
That's why me and you both smoke Winston cigarettes and drink Busch beer. You know?
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of smoking I would have to do to keep up with all the different cigarette liveries that I've seen over the years, including some brands that don't exist in the United States. Like, I would have to be importing my own Silk Cut and Rothmans, just because, race cars told me to.
Have you ever smoked a Silk Cut? No, then it ain't a cigarette. And that's how those cars made it to the States.
Yep.
So, fun fact about toy rules. You cannot have a children's toy with an alcohol or a cigarette brand on it. Or I guess tobacco would be the proper term.
And
but you can have an adult collectible.
Right, and given how many race cars from the 70s and 80s in particular were sponsored by one of those products or the other.
Doesn't NASCAR still allow beer?
Yeah, alcohol is still allowed in various racing series. Actually, there's Johnny Walker is on some Formula One cars. But yeah, tobacco is pretty much out across the board because of various laws that have come about in the last 20 years. But alcohol is
still fair game.
Heineken is a major sponsor of Formula One, although they get around it by having commercials starring Jackie Stewart in which he tells you not to drink. So, because they have like a progression of Jackie Stewart through the years being offered Heinekens and saying, "No, I'm driving. I can't drink." Even up to today, and he says, "I'm still driving.
This is Jackie Stewart.
Yeah,
saying, "Ha ha, Fireball Roberts."
Yeah.
There's another joke only HO racers are gonna get.
Pretty much.
So, interesting fact actually. Back in the day, Aurora had these competitions, and they accidentally had the biggest IndyCar purse ever because they offered the winner of a on-television race with real IndyCar drivers like 10 grand or something. It was something ridiculous for the mid-60s.
I was not aware of that.
And I remember reading this in many of the Aurora books that and it was actually like the biggest purse a driver could win, even more so than an actual IndyCar race.
After that, they then had their own non-championship series of non-championship F1 races.
Yeah,
it's like go get an F1 car and race just for money. No prestige, just money.
Yeah.
So.
But I remember Aurora doing that, and I also remember that none of the IndyCar, because there's footage of it.
Yeah.
It was on television. None of the drivers actually practiced. They all fell out on the first turn. Because anybody who's ever actually picked up a slot car and tried one knows no one ever makes their first turn.
Yeah, no, because it looks deceptively simple.
No, I pull this trigger and I'm amazing.
Particularly, if you haven't ever really given any thought to how racing a real car on a real track works, you think,
and you've only played with Mario Kart,
right? And you think the faster I go, the faster I go. Like, there's no such thing as going too fast. Like, there's no thought given to.
You can't drive speed into a car.
Yeah. I mean, in that sense, Jackie Stewart was right. Slot car racing is the closest thing to real racing, especially until realistic physics became a part of video games.
Which, to retread on another episode, which we don't recommend you watch.
I do.
Really? I don't know. I feel like
Just for the title.
Just for the title and the ending joke. I put a lot of work into that pun, damn it.
Yeah.
Mike, don't you have two nieces that every time they come here try to race this track? And what happens when they go around the corners?
They've gotten a little bit better at it, although they haven't raced the new layout.
Oh. Well, then they're fucked.
Do you even have a second controller?
No, when I was using the correct.
Yeah, the career ones, because you can always put a tire under that so that they can't floor it.
Right, the only other controller I have is a 70 ohm TJ controller. So actually, that would be perfect.
Which translates as he doesn't have another controller because he doesn't want to lose to Kevin 2.0.
That's true. Yeah, actually, I should get one.
Probably. I mean, there's multiple ones out there, and there's
have
the NJ Hobby exclusive, Mike.
I know there is. I've actually been thinking of getting one.
The DS, yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Which is a very fun story, but for business legally reasons, we won't go into it. But the only place you can get 120 ohm DS controllers at NJ Hobby in New Jersey. In case the NJ stood for something else.
Never jerks. Well, that's not true.
I worked there. I worked there, and even there was more than one time where my dad looked at me and like, you need to tone it down. Like,
yeah. I think I would make his day if I bought a controller from him.
probably, yeah.
I think I'll go do that.
Which one? Just the Buck 20, 90, 85?
Yeah, I have a 70. I actually have a 25, 35, 45 farmer controller, but it has a headphone jack on it, so I'd have to rewire it to...
I would just get a DS and call it a day.
I think so.
Yeah, so actually recently, and here's something, I mean, in the last 15 minutes of the show we might as well get into for a little bit. We always make fun of the controllers because you end up with so many of them. Because they're different for 132nd, and they're different for different 132nd cars, and they're different for HO, and they're different for different types of...
just use my Professor Motor.
A lot of people use Professor, including myself.
Kevin just uses, and you just use, for the most part, a Professor Motor controller. But
yeah, but that involves dropping, nowadays, $170 on the controller. Wow. Yeah, remember back in the day when we bought them for $100?
Yeah, and I thought that was a lot of money to spend on it.
They're getting up there now, because they are made in the U.S., although the DS controllers, which are really the evolution of the Parma. So Parma, and I'm going to tell this story because it's common knowledge, and it's hilariously dumb. So Parma was a company that was American-made, everything was done in America, and the owner of Parma at the time was going through a divorce.
Oh.
So he liquidated his company so that he wouldn't have anything when he went into the divorce hearings.
Is that actually what happened to Parma?
That is the official story. I've heard it from multiple people in the industry.
Wow.
And that's why nobody could get Parma-style controllers, or Ruskit-style controllers if you're really old.
Yeah, I mean, that's what
for years. And then finally, these DS controllers
they were a
came out.
linchpin of the RC world, too. I mean, that must have really messed up the RC hobby as well.
I have never run into an actual RC enthusiast. I've run into people who bought RC cars.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin has dabbled in RC.
He's dabbled, but I've never seen him in a league. I've never seen an RC league.
No. I mean, I've been to Tech Toys. That's about as close as I've gotten
to...
and I mostly went there looking for plastic model kits with my father in the 90s. But they are still there.
Yeah. I mean...
Speed shop for RC racing.
Every now and then I'll get an RC toy just to, like, dick around with it.
Yeah.
Like, the tiny RC cars were fun when those were new. The tiny RC boat, which was an evolution of that, which you put in the tub.
Fun. Yeah.
The tiny quadcopters now are the big thing.
Right. I had all I wanted in the world was a Tyco Turbo Hopper when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
I'm dating myself.
Yeah.
But what I ended up with was a Tyco Micro Hopper. Now we're getting into Tyco RC, which is about as far off topic as we can get. While
it still involves Tyco, yeah.
Tyco RC cars came in two flavors. There was the high-end Tyco products that had the 9.6 volt rechargeable battery and a full function controller. Actually, they came in three flavors. One that took a series of AA batteries that would be dead in minutes and still had the full function controller. And then they had a series of cars that would run backwards in a clockwise circle until you pulled the trigger.
And then it would go
the controller was like a slot car controller. It was just a trigger.
Yeah. I have a Batmobile like that.
So
I actually remember having some of those.
I had a Tyco Micro Hopper, which
just went backwards. Yeah.
It ran backwards until it ran forwards. You couldn't turn. Like if you, I'm trying to picture like if you were anything other than like a 6-year-old kid, which I was playing with this, how you would even deal with it. Because imagine driving in your car. This is a funny thought exercise. Imagine driving to work if the only way you could go around a corner
was backwards
if you
backwards to the
started
left.
going backwards and to the left until you were pointing the way you wanted to be pointed. I mean, I think the world would be a much funner place. Maybe we would take ourselves less seriously if this is how we traveled.
The best part about that is that style of RC car persisted for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And that has to be one of the least fun ways to play with an RC car, now that I think about it.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah.
How hard was it to come up with 3 switches?
And they knew how to do it. I mean, I had a number of Tyco cars that had...
Actual steering.
Yeah, I had a Domino's Indy car, and I had a Days of Thunder Mellow Yellow Lumina. That was a Grand Prix that's a Lumina on it.
Mellow Yellow, like man. That's the only reason anyone knows that soda, is that one movie.
At least in the North, yeah. I mean, you know. Because in the South, Mountain Dew is big enough that you need 2 brands of it.
Let me tell you about the South. Kevin 2.0 says. Because in the South, when you're from Virginia, there's a place called King's Dominion, and they had a simulated ride of Days of Thunder.
So how do you simulate the experience of Days of Thunder?
Is it just one of those boxes that they shook?
It was a movie theater that they made the seats go
left
and right.
Yep. That's exactly what I thought it was.
Honestly, I feel like that's what it's like to drive in a race car.
I imagine that a Days of Thunder simulator would be simulating the experience of watching Days of Thunder, which would just be a person slapping you in the face for an hour and a half.
No, this was much better than that.
It's U13, Home of the Cold. watching the movie on TV.
And wishing it was better.
Yeah. I watched so many movies when I was as a kid, just
because you were sick.
Yeah.
Days of Thunder is right up there among the classics of the racing movie genre with Driven.
Days of Thunder, who actually did get a ton of Tyco releases between RC and the slot car line.
Yeah.
And in fact, they even made, and I'm sure this is a Grail piece.
Maybe it was just Matchbox made cars of it.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
But I think Tyco made a playset that came with the Matchbox cars packed in.
Might have.
I think I had it.
Because Tyco had...
It was like a tabletop, like, bleachers.
They made 5 Days of Thunder cars?
Yeah. 3 of which were driven by the Tom Cruise character, but he was racing against himself.
But still, they made 5, although, as we all know, Tyco Tracks comes in pairs.
Right.
And that's where the number 3 Tyco car comes in.
Tyco, don't call it good wrench.
Yeah, don't call it a good wrench.
Yeah.
I've been here for years car.
Yeah.
And which, I mean, it's rare because they never sold it anywhere. It was just in the movie theaters. But I guess I'm just so spoiled growing up where I grew up that I see that car everywhere. I see it in every collection I go to. I see it to every show I go to.
And there's always a couple in the case in the store.
Yeah, because
because it seems like the Hardee's one is the hardest one to find.
And it's not, because that was actually produced.
Yeah.
As opposed to just running a couple out of the factory for the movie theaters. Right. But, then again, we're in an area where Tyco was.
Right, that's true.
I'm
just thinking back when I was 13. My friend that actually got me back into slot car racing, because I had first done it when I was very young, and then he discovered it when we were in middle school, and it pulled me back into it, and I have never really abandoned it completely since then. He discovered it as though it had not existed before, and he was desperate to collect the Days of Thunder cars because reasons.
Nostalgia.
And I remember going
rose-colored goggles.
Yeah, I remember going into the store and like picking up one of the Days of Thunder cars at a time with him, and finally it came down to the Hardee's car, which we had not yet picked up, and we could only find the ones that said Lumina across the top of the windshield, which meant it cost more.
Lumina.
Rarer. The more places that said Lumina on it, the rarer it was, because eventually GM said, please stop writing Lumina on Grand Prix. You're just calling attention to the fact that this is our business model, making the same car and calling it different things.
GM, stop using us as an example. Tycho, stop being an example.
That would be the W for win a car body. Another review we'll never get around to. But
I don't know. I think we've proven tonight one of many things that we can actually stay on topic reasonably.
yeah, if we are
for an hour,
if we are not driving on the highway
or playing with toys,
we are actually capable of doing this, which I think that's good news. Unless you really hate hearing about slot cars, in which case I don't know why you're watching this.
watching
/ listening.
Yeah.
Watching the BTE logo on the screen. Well, listening.
This ought to be good once we get Magilla back here.
Yeah. Yeah.
On that note, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up again, guys. If anybody made it this far, congratulations. Enjoy the one funny joke that Mike is about to post
Yes.
up. I really hope it's an actual joke and not just fuck you, Brian.
I'll come up with something.
Right? What's the random YouTube stuff we have to say? Remember to like and subscribe.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah, all this stuff that no one's gonna do.
Yeah, go ahead and not do those things, and that would make our lives easier, for sure.
Right.
Especially the commenting, because we would have some idea,
We'd have something to bounce off of.
why you hate us so much.
Right, on that note, guys,